World news begins with the U.S. District Judge Nancy Maldonado agreeing to stay on order requiring Chicago State University (CSU) to provide certain academic documents of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, Magistrate Judge Jeffrey Gilbert had 2 days ago ordered the CSU to submit the documents by the end of Thursday. But during an emergency hearing on Thursday, according to CBS News, Judge Maldonado gave attorneys on both sides an order to file additional arguments by next Thursday. Lawyers of the Nigerian president argue that Gilbert's decision needed to be reviewed by district judge, and their request was granted by Maldonado, who said she would rule as quickly as possible after that. She said, "I will have a very busy weekend." You'll recall that Tinubu had filed an emergency motion asking the Chicago court to delay the release of his academic records till at least Monday, September 25th. The Chicago court had ordered the CSU to hand over all records relating to Tinubu's studentship to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar within 2 days. Atiku himself is insisting that Tinubu's claim of graduating from the Chicago State University is not authentic. He then filed an application which sought the documents to prove that the Nigerian leader was not eligible to vie for the presidential election when he did. Meanwhile, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has stated that severe and irreparable harm will be done to him if Chicago University releases his records to the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar. In a fresh appeal filed at an upper U.S. court, Tinubu asked the judge to save him from suffering severe and irreparable damage by placing an emergency hold on a recent order for his university records to be released. According to the president, the damage he would suffer would be impossible to mitigate if the order directing the release of his academic record to Tinubu is not delayed for a possible vacation. Severe and irreparable harm will be done to Bola Tinubu if the records are not released. Tinubu's lawyer argued at an emergency appeal before Judge Nancy Maldonado of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois in Chicago. Now, President Bola Tinubu's lawyer stated that if the records are released, harm will be done and cannot be taken back to the bottle. You do recall that Judge Jeffrey Gilbert of the United States District Court had on Tuesday, September 19, ordered Chicago State University to release Tinubu's records to Atiku as part of an ongoing election petition proceeding in Nigeria. The judge said the records must be turned over to Atiku, the 2023 presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, on September 21. Gilbert said that Tinubu weakened his education privacy rights when he submitted a contentious certificate to run for office in 2022. He also added that the opposition candidate's election petition, in which the records he sought would be used, far outweighed Tinubu's privacy interest because he himself exposed his records to public scrutiny by submitting a controversial diploma to INEC, knowing the political stakes of other contenders. Judge Gilbert also said the school administrators must submit themselves to certify all released records under oath. Now, I have joining me via the telephone a legal practitioner, a social commentator, that is a social affairs commentator, and that is Barrister Eze Eluche. Barrister Eze Eluche, good afternoon and welcome to the World News at 12 right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM.
Thank you for having me in your studios.
Thank you so much, Barrister Eze Eluche. And again, we're back to the whole CSU debacle. Every day we keep having one situation or the other, one development or the other concerning his certificate. And it is quite worrisome when we see the updates that comes up concerning, what his record is all about. And the question that have been asked all this while is, what exactly is the problem? Why the back and forth? Why the secrecy? Why does it seem like there is something extraordinary behind this particular CSU certificate? Another question would be that some persons will think that the president should have just, kept quiet. But look at what he said, there will be irreparable damage. What kind of damage would he incur if the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party has access to, his document?
Thank you very much. Let me talk about the issue of irreparable damage. Already, Nigeria is suffering irreparable damages by virtue of the fact that the person who purports himself as our president is abroad internationally in a court in the US defending his rights or defending the issue of his certificate, whether it is forged or not. The kind of public odium, the kind of insults Nigerians are receiving, that Nigeria has a president whose certificate is not even sure, is causing the country irreparable damages. Nobody really cares what Mr. Tinubu feels or whether
But
he's
no,
damaged or
Barrister,
not.
he is saying that it's going to cause him irreparable damage. In what sense? He tendered this certificate to INEC. He did
Yes.
tender the certificate to INEC. So if you knew the stakes available, if you knew that document was contentious, why did you deposit it in the first instance? And what kind of harm would come to you? Because literally he was pleading like his safety was on the crossroad.
No, the reality is that if you know you've gone wrong, that's the only reason, that's the only circumstance under which you can be talking of any fear. And what harm, like you rightly said, what harm will he face if it is realized or decided that his certificates are forged? He becomes a forger. And the way it is now, with all these defenses Mr. Tinubu is bringing up, it is very, very clear that he has things to hide. And the fact that he has anything to hide with his certificate is enough admission of guilt. I mean, irrespective of what the courts decide, in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the average Nigerian, in the eyes of the international community, this man is already tainted. There is no two ways about it. If you said you went to a particular school, you submitted the certificate to the INEC, to the authorities, and you now said details of that certificate will cause you irreparable harm. What harm, for goodness sake? That's why I said the entity being faced with irreparable damages is you and I, who have to carry about a Nigerian passport, who have to go about with the tag of a Nigerian citizen, that we are ruled by a character who is afraid of his details of his certificate being released. It's worrisome.
But Barrister Eze,
Yes.
I really want to understand. I want to put this in context. One of the reasons why we have these in-depth interviews during the news is possibly to enlighten ourselves and get the facts right. So it doesn't seem like we're going with the wave of other stakeholders or other persons' comments that may not have any logical fact. This is basically what his lawyer said, his legal team said, to substantiate or defend the reason why there should be a stay on releasing his record. And there is something the judge said which already explains everything we're talking about. He said that if you know the stakes available, why did you tender such a document? That's one question he also asked. And then he also recommended that the school administrators must submit themselves to certify all released records under oath. I don't know if you recall at the initial stage when this certificate debacle came up. I recall during the time that they sat in court in Chicago, where his legal team, it was via a press conference, it was via a conference call where he had to defend himself. Now he said something. Atiku Abubakar's legal team asked, the school to swear under oath. That was part of what they asked the school to do. I remember Tinubu's team, I read it then, where Tinubu's team said there is no need for the school to swear under any oath when they can just admit, after all, that he indeed attended that institution. So there is no need for anybody to swear under any oath. And literally said that PDP is on a fishing expedition. That's what he said. And that literally this document may not even be of any significance at the apex court while they're trying to appeal. So when you keep saying that it is important to look at some of these critical issues, you now wonder if the school themselves have said he indeed attended the school. They have admitted that he went to the school, he got a diploma certificate from them. Why is the legal team now telling the school to put a stay on releasing his certificate? What exactly is in there that he's afraid to be let out?
Now, I think I've mentioned earlier before on this program that what the school authorities are doing by their pre-verification is to avoid a long spell in prison for perjury. They can say whatever else they've been saying, they can admit he was a student, they can do whatever, but the court has now asked them to swear to an oath before the court. That changes the entire scenario. Because when you have sworn on oath in a matter before a court, and it's proved that you lied, somebody will be in jail for that because it becomes a criminal offense. That is the difference between what the school has been saying prior to now and what the court has ordered the school. And the reality is this: the court has sensed that somebody is lying, and the court wants to hold somebody accountable for lies. That is why the school will fight tooth and nail based on whatever arrangement they have with Mr. Tinubu to avoid swearing to an oath. But when the court gives you an order that you must swear to an oath to facts that you have deposed to, then you must swear to that oath. So that is the issue now. What the court has put, the court has put a stage, has put a final hurdle, whereby if you know your school gave this man certificate and not a woman, come and swear to an oath to what you gave. And thereafter, every umbrella person can go and rest. And the issue is this: once that oath is now sworn, it will be easier to verify that oath with reality. And if it is proved to be false, then I don't know how much whoever would have paid that school, the vice chancellor or whoever, to lie on oath, because he's going to be in prison. That is where the issue now changes, yes.
All right, Barrister Oluche, some persons believe that if the tribunal has given a judgment, that there is no need for the presidency to be afraid. There is every obvious reason to believe that possibly the Supreme Court will validate what decision the tribunal already made. And so that there is really no reason for him to raise any tantrum, for him to question any other proceeding from the opposition political party, to actually stay on their ground that they were the ones who won the elections, and rather for him to focus on issues that concerns governance and security. But do you think it would have been better if he had just kept quiet and allowed things to be? The school already asked the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party that they will release the records to him, because the reason why he asked for that record is authentic enough, concerning the fact that there are questions concerning his eligibility, that is President Tinubu's eligibility as, the president of the country. And the judge also said something that Tinubu had already, he has lubricated, or rather he has diluted the effect of his education privacy rights when he submitted a contentious certificate to run for office in 2022. Now, do you think the school themselves are being double-mouthed? Today we hear that the president indeed attended the institution. Tomorrow we saw an affidavit by a particular secretary of the school verifying that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did indeed attend the university, and also mentioned that on the year with which he attended, the only difference was the font and the school seal, which they said is also understandable because at that year it was manually imprinted. So any errors, which includes the gender, they misgendered him, which includes the gender that they put in there, the possibly date of birth, and also other things that may have been an anomaly, it's expected because that was in 1979. How come the school itself, the judge is saying that certificate the school supposedly authenticated is contentious?
Well, your first question was about the Supreme Court, whether it can still listen to what this new argument. The issue is that the fact is this: the Supreme Court is a court of very wide powers and jurisdiction. That it can do whatever it can do to attain justice. So if it turns out that what Tinubu submitted is proved to be a lie, when the university now gives this statement on oath, the Supreme Court can still act on it, whether it is part of what has been stated before or not, because it is a court of justice, it's a court of law, and it's a court of policy. So it can actually reverse what the tribunal had already ruled on. With regards to the continued defensive mechanism Mr. Tinubu is deploying, I think even to the blind, it is clear that this man has a very fishy past, that this certificate is modeled up in things that are beneath par. So the reality is he's just trying to prolong the evil day. He's trying to prolong the time when all these realities will come out to the fore. What we should be worried about is what is the implication of all this on Nigerians.
But hold on, before you mention the implications, I want to read out this phrase. When I read it, I was stunned myself as to the kind of depth in the plea. It's almost like somebody saying, "Help me! If you don't help me, I will drown." You say in this appeal that, please, I am going to suffer irreparable damage. You need to place an emergency hold on this order. You're also stating that it is impossible for him to have his state of well-being if these records are released. In fact, he argued through his lawyer that this is an emergency and it was important for the court to put a stay on it. He said severe and irreparable harm will be done to him, and that whatever happens afterwards, it would be impossible to mitigate if that order is not allowed to stay on the release of his records to his opposition. What does that mean? I need to understand what that means.
Okay, now it's very, very clear. What irreparable harm can be done to Mr. Tinubu if the facts get released? If, for instance, it is released that it is true that he did go to that school and the school issued him a certificate, there will be no harm at all. Now, the irreparable harm will be if what the school now deposes on oath is to the fact that Mr. Tinubu forged the documents, or that Mr. Tinubu did not even attend the school as and when he said he attended, or that the person who was admitted was a female and not a male, that Mr. Tinubu is, or that the person who attended the school is a US citizen and not a Nigerian citizen. So these are the issues that will cause irreparable harm. So if the fact was the Tinubu attended the school as he claimed to be and everything went his way, there will be no harm. So if he claims that there will be irreparable harm, Nigerians and the world already knows what the school will likely divulge.
With what you just explained now, Barrister Eze, wouldn't this implicate the school?
The school, look, the way it works, like I keep on telling Nigerians, we should not say because the school is based in America, then it's a 100% saintly school, a school that belongs to divine issues. No. The highest schools in the United States, Yale University, Harvard University, Princeton, and some other Ivy League institutions, were recently involved in examination racketeering and admission fraud. So we should not say because they are in America, then they are above board. No. This school already, the Chicago State University, have proved with this case that this is a fraudulent institution. It is a school that cannot be relied on to say the facts as at when due and as it is. Why must a school wait for anybody to use a court order to bring out the educational history of anybody? I went to Georgetown University. Anybody can apply to Georgetown for my records from Georgetown, and I will not be bothered about what those records are because I know I have my certificate and everything. It only happens when there is fraud involved. And clearly, if Mr. Tinubu is saying he will suffer irreparable damages, it is very, very clear what the issues are. And we should stop prevaricating. It is a very clear-cut case of somebody is trying to protect his ass because he knows he has lied, he knows he has perjured, he knows he has given false documentations to the INEC and other agencies of government. So he will suffer irreparable harm, and he should suffer it if indeed he lied to Nigerians. And he should suffer that irreparable harm if he has used false pretenses to become the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He should suffer irreparable harm if he has deposited falsehood and got Nigerians to vote for him based on those falsehoods. And that irreparable harm must shift to him and not to Nigerians. I keep on saying, the people who are suffering the irreparable harm now are Nigerians. You and I, who have to travel with a Nigerian passport, who have to portray a Nigerian degrees. When the person who is the president is with a doubtful certificate, then what about yours and mine? How can that be trusted by foreign entities?
Okay,
like the problem, the impact of this is on the youth. We noticed that not too long ago, after Mr. Tinubu became president, a young girl forged her JAMB results so that she can become the highest. Yes. Now, why will anybody blame someone for forging her JAMB results to become the highest in JAMB if somebody also forged the Chicago State University results or certificate to become president? I mean, it is morally unconscionable to blame any forger or to blame any certificate, any person who forges certificates, whether it's NYSC or whatsoever, to get any position in Nigeria if you can have a president who is who might have forged his certificate from Chicago State University. Unfortunately enough, just yesterday or 2 days ago, the tribunal in Enugu State told us that it is immaterial if a governor forges an NY certificate because it's not one of the criteria.
Yes, one of Enugu.
What kind of nonsense are we descending to in the country? When a forger can be, and the court can stamp its authority on it, That because that issue is not part of the criteria.
Now, Barrister Eze, let me ask
it's so
you:
annoying. Yes.
Are we now having a pattern where certificate forgeries, especially for public office holders, will now become an accepted norm that our judiciary too may also accommodate? The situation with Enugu, whereby the tribunal ruled on the NYSC certificate, you recall that the Director General of the NYSC came out to say that that NYSC certificate that Peter Mba displayed is not from them. They do not even know where that certificate from. It does not bear their serial number, does not bear their seal, doesn't look like their certificate at all. That was the NYSC DG who said that. And if he authenticated the fact that that certificate is not from them, literally it has invalidated that as a legal substance to be displayed by Peter Mba. But the tribunal has come and given its own judgment. Now let's look at the same thing occurring again with the president. It's the same debacle that the president is facing, and it is quite unfortunate when we look at things, because this administration is saying that they want to run a transparent and all-inclusive governance, and it is going to be quite difficult for them to get the trust of the people if we're seeing these developments come up every day. Now, apparently, the U.S. District Judge granted the president's request to delay the order which required the Chicago State University to provide certain academic documents related to his graduation from the university. Now, this decision underscores the importance of upholding due process and ensuring fair proceedings in resolving the election dispute. And as we do know, this dispute arose when President Tinubu's opponent, that is Atiku Abubakar, simply alleged irregularities in the election and questioned the authenticity of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's academic records. Well, for the judge, who is saying that since it is for the sake of democracy, he's saying that with the state of emergency implored on them by the president on a stay of that document being released to the People's Democratic Party's presidential candidate, the judge is also saying that it is quite fair to uphold democracy. They are actually arguing that the immediate compliance with the order could lead to the premature disclosure of sensitive information, potentially prejudicing his case. And so by seeking a delay, the president aims to safeguard the integrity of the legal process. Can you explain that, please? I don't understand that aspect.
No, the fact is that when a man is trying to cover his ass, he can go to all extent and make all sorts of arguments before the courts. And maybe other things will exchange hands and not just the law. Because what Tinubu is trying to protect is so-called integrity. There is none. There is absolutely none when you are trying to say you did not go to school you went to. So what I mean, the court's orders now are becoming mundane, and I think Nigerians should close this chapter. The reality is that you have a president in Nigeria who purported to have graduated from a school and is doing all he can do to protect that school from releasing his certificate, which can only lead to one conclusion. And that conclusion is that this man is not who he says he is, or who he says he was when he attended that university. And you see, there's a trend already going on in Nigeria now, where it is no longer an issue of false certificates. It also extends to the issue of criminality in governance. We have two ministers who did not do NYSC period. They did not serve the NYSC scheme, and they are ministers in government today. That is a crime under the NYSC Act. So we have criminals in government. We have an institution whereby the laws have been thrown overboard. We have a Naira Marley, for instance, who was made an NDLEA ambassador. That's an ambassador of the Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency. He's now implicated in murder. So the entire country has gone down the drains. And it's because we have failed to address these issues. A fish rots from the top. If the person that proposed as the president, is involved in this level of criminality, and I'm being very, very soft with it. What else? What moral guts have you got to put anybody in prison for a crime in Nigeria under these circumstances? It is so unfortunate.
All right, Barrister Eze Luche, I sincerely do appreciate your input on the World News at 12. I may have proceeded to other conversations that we need to have in reaction specifically to what the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party said. I need you to shed a little bit of light on that before I let you go. Now, Atiku Abubakar has accused the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal of ridiculing him when it upheld the victory of President Bola Tinubu. And you do know that on September 6, 2023, petitions from the People's Democratic Party as well as the Labour Party were dismissed by the Presidential Election Petition Court. Now, through his lead counsel, that is Atiku Abubakar's lead counsel, Chris Uche, he has filed an appeal before the Supreme Court challenging the judgment of what the appeal court, that is what the presidential court actually ruled on. Now, Atiku is claiming that disparaging words were used by the tribunal when it upheld Tinubu's victory, which he said were signs that it was biased against him and his party. The former vice president stated that the choice of words and expressions by the tribunal shows its contempt and disdain for him and the PDP. He added that it is guaranteed under the law for a candidate to file a petition against the outcome of an election he is not comfortable with. And he went on to say quite a lot of things. He mentioned that the tribunal failed to take into cognizance the doctrine of legitimate expectation, which he noted is a reason the verdict affirming Tinubu's victory should be overturned. And the flag bearer also argued, the PDP flag bearer also argued that the alleged non-compliance by INEC with the Electoral Act is another reason the verdict should be nullified. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's not proper for the PDP Atiku team to say they were disparaged or maligned by the court tribunal judgment.
Okay.
It is the entirety of the Nigerian population, the Nigerian constitution, the Nigerian lawyers, Nigerians that were maligned and insulted by the tribunal decision. Because the decision went against all known norms of civility, of jurisprudence. The court descended into the ring of conflict between the parties. The language that was used was an embarrassment to the judicial process. The language used by the tribunal in its judgment was an embarrassment to the legal profession, because you do not have justices or judges in a matter condescending into the arena of conflict and beginning to look like they side only one party. In fact, in that tribunal judgment, they went as low as getting one of the solicitors of the respondent of the APC to try to tell the judges what language to use in their own judgment. Then Nigerians began to have a feeling of what really transpired in that process. It was an embarrassment to Nigeria that kind of judgment was read in the full purview of the international community, and it has affected the level or the height which Nigerians and the world place on the judiciary. Many Nigerians now think twice before even going to court. They will wonder, have I done enough? Even if I'm innocent, will I get justice? Even if I'm on the right side, will I get justice when we have this crop of judicial officers manning the system? So Atiku was not personally insulted. I can understand his grievance, but the parties that were insulted by the tribunal judgment is the Nigerian Constitution, the Nigerian Federation, and Nigerian legal practitioners, and Nigerians in their entirety.
All right, Barrister, thank you very much. You've actually done you've done quite a bit in explaining some of this situation.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you. Thank you. And still on the world news at 12, we do have where the president has stated that the president, that's Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on Thursday will depart to New York in the United States after attending the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. President Tinubu, while in New York, participated in some of the high-level events, including bilateral meetings with some world leaders like the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, among others. He also met with the President of Angola, João Manuel, an ExxonMobil delegation led by the company's President of Global Upstream Operations, Liam Malone, and with King Abdullah ibn Hussein, King of Jordan. On Wednesday, the Nigerian leader met with some Nigerians living in the United States at a town hall meeting where he urged them to come back home, noting that there are a lot of business opportunities in Nigeria. After his interaction with Nigerians, he met with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, where he noted that African nations would start to take appropriate actions against actors that illicitly siphon and smuggle out the continent's vast mineral resources. The Nigerian leader Speaker also told the UN chief that human rights have been used to deter actions against such actors that smuggle out African resources and bring in Western-made weapons. On Thursday, he rang the bell at the National Association of Securities Dealers Automatic Quotation System, NASDAQ, becoming the first African leader to do so. And now to wrap up, here again are the top stories. You heard that the U.S. court has granted Tinubu's request to delay release of school records to Atiku, and President Tinubu explained why his records should not be released to Atiku. President Tinubu leaves New York after attending Unger, and Atiku disparages presidential tribunal's judgment. That's a wrap on the World News at 12 right here in Voice of the People 90.3 FM. My name is Esther Wachuku. Good afternoon and thank you for staying with us.